I think the headline really is going to be twofold. Number one, continuing strong growth. We're looking for about 24% organic growth in revenue, which is very strong, we think, for a company of Alphabet size. And then I think secondarily, I think people are going to be interested to hear about the legal and regulatory environment. Obviously, we saw the $5.1 billion fine last week from the EU, and essentially what Alphabet and Google are going to have to do to manage that environment, which I think they've done a pretty good job of thus far.
And what is your expectation in terms of what comes next on the legal front?
So I guess a couple things come to mind. The first is obviously they're going to work through the EU process as it pertains to Android. But in their comments last week, the European Commission also said that they're continuing to look at AdSense, which is their advertising platform. I think that's going to be a stickier case to make, frankly, for the European Commission. But we'll see. In conjunction with that, it was interesting to see the president commenting on the fine as another example of how Europe is taking advantage of the U.S. in the context of commerce, notwithstanding the fact that we've seen some members of Congress pushing for greater scrutiny of Google in particular in the U.S. Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut comes to mind. So the president actually might have provided additional cover for Alphabet and Google in the context of what he commented on last week. And given that the FTC is part of the executive, I don't know if, let's say, pending additional charges are forthcoming.
How big of a concern is regulatory at this point, Scott? I mean, you mentioned sort of the cover that President Trump gives, but also doing business in the EC, in the EU, is not necessarily easy these days. It seems like big tech has a target on their backs when it comes to fines, when it comes to anti-competitive practices, and even data privacy.
Yeah, no, you're right, Melissa. And what's interesting to me is that this partially is becoming a cost of doing business. Around a year ago, as you probably know, the European Commission fined Alphabet and Google. I think it was around $2.7 billion. We all know that Alphabet has a substantial balance sheet with over $100 billion in cash and short-term investments. The implications, we think, are that they're going to have to continue to kind of manage through a lot of these new regulations. And by the way, the GDPR regulations that were implemented in May, we think on some level, and we've been saying this for a number of months, we think those are probably a net positive for a company like Alphabet because they have the talent and the resources to manage through those when a lot of their competitors, much smaller competitors, can't. So we'll see what they say about that. The other thing that I'm looking for is kind of the, I don't know, balance between what they talk about in terms of search volumes and search pricing, especially influenced by mobile. We've seen pricing going down and we've seen volumes going up. I wonder if we're going to see kind of a bottoming out of pricing that could encourage folks as well.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.